UFC Sao Paulo goes down this weekend. I just wanted to give you guys a quick heads up regarding my Patreon page. www.patreon.com/MMALOTN has a bunch of exclusive content on there for you guys, including a Hail Mary Patreon parlay, extended breakdowns of prelim fights that I don't cover on the regular MMA Lock-Cast show, and then an exclusive locked-in episode every UFC pay-per-view page that the public doesn't get to see. So make sure you guys check that out. Support your boy, and let's make the stream become a reality. Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lock-Cast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMALOTN. This week we're going to be going over UFC Sao Paulo, which is headlined by a light heavyweight matchup between Jan Blachowicz and Jacare Souza, who's going to be making his 205-pound debut after a letdown in his last fight against Jack Hermansson. Very intriguing fight up top there, especially for Jan Blachowicz, who's trying to continue his win streak after turning back Luke Rockhold back in July as well. And then in the co-main event, we have another 205-pound scrap between Mauricio Shogun Hua and Paul Craig, stepping in on short notice to fill in for Sam Alvey. That should be an intriguing fight as well, but obviously those don't have as much possible title ramifications as the main event does. As you guys can tell, once again, I'm not at Big Rob's place. We had a pretty shitty snowstorm up here in Toronto, and it kind of kept me back. And obviously, I want to stick to a pretty firm schedule in terms of getting my content out. But I should be back there for UFC DC, which I believe is the next event, which goes down December 7th, if I'm not mistaken. So we got a 2-week break. So this is probably the last MMA Lock-Cast episode you guys will see until UFC DC. I'll still be releasing Combative Swords with Tony over the weekend. And then also deciding splits we'll have on this Sunday if there's obviously a split decision this Sunday or something controversial. Otherwise, I have something special lined up for you guys over the next 2 weeks for deciding splits to kind of fill the time while the next UFC event comes. So let's get into the recap of UFC Moscow, which went down this past weekend. Fuck, dude. Like this one really put me down in the dirts a bit. To get under that negative mark overall lifetime kind of feels shitty. I went through a lot of shit in terms of just mentally, in terms of getting back into the groove, trying to figure out where I've gone wrong and where this half year, the second half of this year has been pretty much a shit show. And I'm trying to narrow down where I've kind of been going wrong. And it seems to me that I believe that the volume of bets that I've been going for as well as some of the long shot props that I'm going for is really affecting my overall results. At the end of the day, all of these long shots that I miss on, they continue to add up. That's not saying that I'm going to get rid of the Hail Mary Patreon parlay. That's something new that I've added, and I know for sure, over a long period, there will be more losses than wins on the Hail Mary parlay, but that's the reason for a Hail Mary parlay. Once it hits, I believe it pays back just as much over the long term. So that's not going to go around anywhere, but I think I'm going to be very strict in terms of the amount that I'm going into these events with. I think I'm going to go back to my, what I've found success with a little bit earlier, which was kind of just finding that lock of the night play, hammering that shit, and then maybe just going with one dog play that I feel somewhat confident in. I've been, caught up in trying to find the value in a lot of these lines, and I think that's kind of blinded me from, going into these events doing what I do best, and that's trying to find the best lock play. And even that I feel like has gotten a little bit hazy by whiffing on a couple. The Gregor Gillespie one, that one I'll take on the chin just as he did. And then this Imadiev one, that one was a kind of a sloppy play. Like it felt more than more than justified in the moment when I pulled the trigger on it, 3.5 units at minus 120, considering a guy that's as chinny as Danny Roberts. But I did take away a lot from his actual technical capabilities of how he's actually able to put his punches together, be very crisp, and throw a lot of power punches himself. I thought even with Imadiev's style of being as flashy and out there as he is with his striking, I thought it was going to throw off Danny Roberts, and Zillim was going to be able to catch the chin just as Michel Pereira did in the past. As well as Claudio Silva, maybe not finishing him, but catching him and then eventually submitting him. But I took too much stock out of Danny Roberts' technical abilities, and I paid for it dearly here. It's been a tough little stretch, but I know I'm good at this shit. I know this is what I'm destined to do, and I know that I can give you guys the best betting advice out there, and I'm going to continue to fucking do it, and hopefully cap the next 4 events off with a little bit of a winning streak. I know this year alone as a win is probably out the door unless I hit all 4 of my Hail Mary parlays in every bet period. I know that's highly unlikely, but I'm kind of accepting that this year is kind of a loss. And trying to look at it as a brand new slate already, and just go back to what I fucking know, and give you guys those lock of the night fucking plays that you guys can bang on with all the money that you guys could potentially do, obviously with money management in mind. Yeah, these max plays, it's got to be a fucking banger if I give it out to you guys. So I've dug pretty deep into this UFC Sao Paulo card so far. I have 2 potential lock of the night plays that I'm considering. I'm only going to go with one, but I won't be going over it in this specific episode. I will more than likely, it is a prelim fight. I'm not going to specify exactly which one when I go through my quick pick fights, but I will for sure be posting a breakdown of it as a MMA Lock-Cast Plus episode, which you guys are going to be able to find on the Patreon page. So yeah, I kind of already went into my lock of the night play loss, which was minus 3.5 U on Imadiv to win inside the distance. Another loss was my dog of the night play, which was Calvin Kattar, 1 unit at plus 240. That's minus 1 unit there. Kind of went in there with how I expected it to go, except that third round, I expected Calvin to push a little bit harder to possibly, either get a 10-8 round or even get us finished there against Zabit. Zabit just held his distance well. He did eat some shots. Calvin Kattar obviously won that third round. But I don't know. I still feel like it probably wasn't the best move out there. And also the other underdog I was considering was Greg Hardy, and I'm glad I skipped out on that one. And then my other play was 1.25 unit parlay on Urustam Khabilov and Roosevelt Roberts. That was plus 163 for plus 2.04 units. Rustam Khabilov was kind of my initial lock of the night play lean. I'm not sure why I stuck away from it. Eventually, I ended up playing Imadiv inside the distance at 3.5 units. And by that time, Khabilov's numbers started to drop a little bit. In that parlay, I got him at minus 189. I probably would have locked in the night, played him there. And I'm kind of kicking myself for not doing that. But, I got to be very, very fucking cautious about when I pull the trigger on these upcoming events and make sure that I'm 150% in before I do. I was 100% in on this Imadiv play, and the only reason I staked only 3.5 units is because the odds are at minus 120. There's no point in going in the full 5 units in case it ended up shitting the bed, and there we go. It ended up shitting the bed, and I saved 1.5 units in terms of not going the full 5. Khabilov goes out there and does what he does, probably puts on the boringest fight of the night, but still pulls out the decision victory, which he so deserved. And then the Roberts fight was a little bit more of a sweat, but he still pulls out the victory, so I'm happy with that. At the end of it all, including the minus 0.25 lock of the night, or not, my Hail Mary parlay of the night, which was whiffed by an Abreu horrible robbery decision, but then there was a little bit more of a stamp put on that loss with Imadiv losing there as well. So at the end of it all, minus 2.71 units on UFC Moscow, very, very shitty. But I'm not done. I know I'm going to kill this shit. So UFC Sao Paulo is up next. Big card in terms of at least the top fights. But there are some quality fights scattered throughout it. The return of Renan Barão, or the ghost of Renan Barão, Warlley Alves against Randy Brown, Francisco Trinaldo versus Bobby Green is a great fight as well. I was wondering why the hell they put Antonio Arroyo and Andre Muniz on the main card here. However, after looking into these guys a little bit more, I understand why. So I'm excited for that fight. That should be a great fight too. Sergio Moraes against James Krause, Shogun Rua against Paul Craig, Charles Oliveira against Jared Gordon. That's going to be a great fight. Charles Oliveira continues to go out there and fight unranked lightweights, but apparently guys just don't want to fight him, so I'm not too mad at that. But I love this card from top to bottom, and I'm excited to break it down for you guys. But as you guys always know, I have been doing it for the past couple of episodes now. I'll be doing quick picks on the prelims, with the exception of one that I'll get into, and then I do actual breakdowns of the prelims in their own individual videos on my Patreon page. So make sure you guys help support your boy, www.patreon.com/MMALOTN, and you guys get a little bit more extended coverage and breakdowns there, as well as more exclusive content strictly for you guys, because the ones that actually, ride with me, I'm going to ride with you guys and make sure we make some fucking money. All right, let's start off at the bottom of the card with our quick picks. I'm taking Tracy Cortez over Vanessa Melo. I'm taking Ariane Lipski over Veronica Macedo. Taking Douglas DeAndrade over Renan Barão. Taking Francisco Trinaldo over Bobby Green, even though that's a very, very close fight. I will definitely be passing that. Ricardo Ramos versus over Eduardo Garago. And Garagi, sorry. Damn, I keep fucking up his name. Eduardo, the guy from Uruguay. And then lastly, I'll be taking James Krause over Sergio Moraes. And then let's just get into the prelim fight that I want to go over, which is Warlley Alves versus Randy Brown. I'm seeing a lot of love for this fight. There's a lot of people with a lot of strong opinions and a lot of people putting money on either side. Seeing a little bit more love for Randy Brown than I am for Warlley Alves here, even though Warlley Alves is still the slight favorite at -120. Randy Brown coming back at +100. Let's start off with Warlley Alves. He's coming off a pretty impressive victory over Sergio Moraes, but if you look into that fight a little bit more, you'll see why he was so impressive. First and foremost, his leg kicks. The guy has a mean leg kick, and the fact that Sergio Moraes' stance plays into that as well makes it a little bit easier for him to get away with it. So he was just hammering the leg kicks. Eventually, by the end of the first round, Sergio was already hobbling around on that leg. But with Sergio's wide stance, it just makes it so much easier for Warlley to land those kicks. And he does a good job of hiding those kicks behind some punches. But I kind of seen Sergio Moraes out there as a little bit of a punching bag. He's not the greatest on the feet. He throws a lot of winging hook shots, so it leaves a lot of openings for guys who are much better at striking than him. And we saw it in the Anthony Rocco Martin fight, just as we saw it in this Warlley Alves fight. Sergio Moraes just doesn't have the best the striking defense. His hands are coming together a little bit better, but Warlley Alves, it was no match for him. There's no way that Sergio Moraes was even going to get this fight to the ground. So Warlley Alves was kind of having a field day on the feet, and then he eventually found his finish with a beautiful uppercut within the last minute of the third round. In the fight before that, we saw where he is a little bit, where he finds problems, and that was against James Krause. James Krause came into this fight with a great game plan, which is stay in front of Warlley Alves, continue to push him, don't let him get settled, and make sure that you stay in his face, keep the jab in his face, and that really gave Warlley Alves problems. I think that's where Randy Brown's advantages come into this fight. If he's able to stay persistent with sticking a jab in Warlley Alves' face, throwing leg kicks out there, keeping Warlley Alves moving backwards, I think he's going to give Warlley Alves a lot of problems. Randy Brown, on the other hand, he's coming off a great victory over Brian Barberena, which I think was a two-sided coin here, or just two things in particular. It was the improvements of Randy Brown. Let's not take that away from him, showing great kicks, showing great movement, great accuracy with his striking and aggressiveness as well. And then Brian Barberena, it just seemed like he just wasn't in the fight. I believe it was a fight that was taking place where his kids were. So this was a fight that happened in South Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina. But there was something about the commentary saying that his kids were out there. But also this was a fight where Brian Barberena was coming off a slobber knocker against Vicente Luque in the last fight. That could have an effect on a guy going into that fight. I think I had a little bit of money on Brian Barberena going into that. And I I didn't think it would have had an effect on him, but it seemed like there was an effect on him for sure. There were just plenty of moments in that fight against Randy Brown where Barberena just wasn't, defending properly. He looked flat-footed. He just wasn't in it. There were so many times where Randy Brown was going off on him, and Brian Barberena would just put his hands down and then quickly put them back up. Like, you don't think Randy Brown's going to continuously come after you and put it on you just as he has for the whole fight. He eventually got the finish in that third round, but it just wasn't a good showing. The fight before that, Randy Brown had Nico Price, and we all know how that one ended. Probably one of the craziest knockouts of 2018, where he got finished, on top of Nico Price. I'm a little bit torn here because there is the threat that Warlley Alves could potentially try to outpower Randy Brown here, try to force the clinch and try to get this fight to the ground. As we've seen Randy Brown being able to get takedown quite often. Being lanky, it kind of helps with his potential submission opportunities, but it also could be a negative as well, where he's trying to lock up a body triangle or something like that. His legs just being so long allow guys to kind of just turn out of the position and then end up on top, as we saw in the Nico Price fight. But in the with Warlley Alves in mind, I think this is going to primarily remain a stand-up fight. I think we've seen some improvements in terms of Randy Brown's movement as well. The way he, his footwork and all that. I think he could stick a jab out there in Warlley Alves' face and keep it a long fight. And that's where I believe he'll be most successful, as well as some leg kicks. He needs to throw some leg kicks out there to be a little bit more, to force Warlley Alves to stay on the outside and not close the distance. And then whenever Warlley does try to crash forward, stick a jab in his face, stick some sort of straight punch in his face and keep him on the outside. So with this fight being as lined as close as it is, you kind of got to lean towards the underdog here and take what you want from the Sergio Moraes fight for Warlley Alves. But once you realize that Sergio Moraes wasn't really the best opposition there for him, and the fact that the line was as close as it was, kind of shooting myself in the foot for not taking a shot on Warlley Alves there, but Sergio Moraes just doesn't really do any favors for himself by having the type of striking style that he has and the type of striking defense that he has. So I put a slight asterisk on Warlley Alves' performance against Sergio Moraes, which is why I give Randy Brown the advantage here. And at plus money and at even odds, I think Randy Brown is worth a decent shot here. Personally, I'm not going to bet on him. It's still very close of a fight, and if Warlley Alves does decide to engage in the clinch and try to overpower and wear down Randy Brown, it could be some issues for Brown. But I'm liking the possible the possible scenario here that Randy Brown is just going to outstrike Warlley Alves for 3 rounds, stay on his bicycle, avoid any big shots, and then win the victory that way. So I'm going to take Randy Brown by decision. Very closely lined fight. I wouldn't be mad at anybody placing money on Randy Brown, but me, myself, I'm probably going to pass, especially with the super strict type of strategy I'm going to be using moving forward. So Randy Brown by decision. Next up, we got Markus Perez versus Wellington Turman. I believe this is the fight kicking off the main card. Let's start off with Markus Perez. He's coming off a victory over Anthony Hernandez last time around. The one thing that strikes me right off the bat with Markus Perez is how heavy his leg kicks are. Against Andrew Sanchez, heavy leg kicks. Even when he was hitting on the arm, you could see the bruising and redness on Andrew Sanchez's arm right off the bat. And no pun intended, because this guy fucking swings his legs like a bat. It's crazy. He throws so much power into them. In the Anthony Hernandez fight, it seemed like Hernandez was going to slowly start to get the better of him, probably out hustle him and kind of put that Cain Velasquez type style on him. But right off the bat in that second round, Markus Perez throws a beautiful body kick, hurts Anthony Hernandez, who kind of crumbles. He follows up with some ground and pound and then eventually lands an anaconda chokes out Anthony Hernandez. That is just a testament to how heavy Markus Perez's leg kicks are. The guy throws with a lot of fucking heat, and when he really wants to turn it on, like he does in the Andrew Sanchez fight, he's got to be wary of potentially getting taken down or getting engaged in clinches and then getting trips or anything like that, which is what Andrew Sanchez was able to do. But I'm not super like outside of that, I'm not super impressed with Markus Perez. And the hard part for me in this fight is the fact that I can't get a good read on Wellington Turman either. I'm not totally sure what to expect with the guy here. It's plus 100 to minus 120 for Markus Perez as the very, very slight favorite. And just as I said in the other in the breakdown for the Brown and Alves fight, I'm like, you want to lean a little bit towards the underdog here, even if it's like plus 100 or so. But I'm not sure with Wellington, man. I've looked into his Carl Roberson fight, his Mauricio Alexandre fight. I just can't get a good read on him. You know, he lost a split decision to Carl Roberson in his last fight. But in the Alexandre fight, you know, showed some good striking. Eventually got the rear naked choke on Alexandre after hurting him. In the Sergio de Fatima fight, kind of pulled for a guillotine there, and then it got a victory via submission. Decent striking, still young. Will be his second fight in the UFC. He's going up against a guy who's going to have his, I believe it's Markus Perez's fourth fight in the UFC. Nope. Make that fifth fight in the UFC. He actually got into the UFC with an arm triangle victory over Ian Heinisch, who kind of has a decent resume on the UFC scene besides his last loss to Uriah Hall, I want to say. No, can't remember who Ian Heinisch lost to in his last fight. Let me confirm that, because I need to do that strictly for my sanity. Because I'm pretty sure, yeah, Derek Brunson. Lost to Derek Brunson. But yeah, Markus Perez, I just don't have the best feel on this fight, or the best view on this fight, just because I don't really know what to expect from Wellington Turman. And then Markus Perez is a little bit, you know, he's gotten a couple of submission victories, but in his UFC career he seems a little bit one-dimensional, so it makes it a little bit more difficult to know what kind of guy we're going to get. Why is it this is weird as hell. Yeah, anyway, I'll take Markus Perez by decision, but I just don't have the best feel or look on this fight, and I personally would pass on it. But if you guys feel like you have a good feel on it, fucking go for it. Next up, we have Antonio Arroyo. Don't forget, he's Brazilian, so those R's are Ha's. Antonio Arroyo versus Andre Muniz. Both guys that were on the on the Brazilian Contender Series, and then also got another fight on this past year's Contender Series, and they both came out pretty much the same. Like they both went to a decision in their Brazil Contender Series fights, and then they come out and get finishes in their regular Contender Series fights. Let's start off with Antonio Arroyo. I was very impressed with this guy's length. This guy is one of the bigger middleweights that you guys will actually see. He's pretty freaking jacked. I like to call him a poor man's Paulo Costa, to be honest. He's 6'2" with a 73.5-inch reach, whereas Andre Muniz is going to be 6'2" with a 78-inch reach. Honestly, it does not seem like that. It seems like these guys are actually going to be a little bit closer when it comes to or won't be as close when it comes to actually matching up with each other metric-wise, if you guys want to call it that. I think Hoyo is going to have the strength advantage here. I think he's obviously going to have the striking advantage here as well. Just like Markus Perez, this guy throws a mean leg kick. I think that's going to be pertinent for him in this fight against Andre Muniz, where I think that he's going to have to really take out Muniz's front wheel to kind of negate any type of possible takedown attempts, as Muniz is going to want to implement his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, whereas I think that Hoyo is going to want to try to keep this on the feet and try to knock him out. He's had a lot of great victories just off of striking. He has a 19-second knockout against Trevor Carlson. Beautiful kick. A kick to the body finish against Antonio Soares. Again, the guy has heat in his legs, and I think that's going to be very, very important for him to implement in this fight. With Andre Muniz, we've seen him multiple times, go for takedowns a little bit too hard and then end up as the guy on bottom, even if it's in like full mount or something like that. I don't know if Hoyo is going to want to really mess around there. as soon as it wouldn't be surprising to me either if Muniz is the one that's actually moving forward here. He's going to want to get Arroyo against the cage and try to drag this fight to the ground. So Arroyo is going to have to keep his distance. He's going to have to keep his length. He's going to have to go the Randy Brown approach here, and he's going to have to stick his jab out there. He's going to have to stick nice straights out there, some front kicks, some teeps. I think it's going to be very, very important for him to keep this fight on the feet because Muniz has just seemed like an absolute killer once it comes to the ground game. He is 18-4, but he's shown, weaknesses when it comes to the striking game itself. Bruno Assis had a little bit of success there. And then Taylor Johnson obviously just wanted to get this fight straight to the ground, and then he paid for it, getting subbed by such a highly touted Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt as Andre Muniz Sergipino. I think that's his name or his nickname. But like I said at the top of the show, I was very surprised that these guys were actually put on the main card over some of the great fights that are on the prelims. But actually watching these guys are very, very fun to watch. I don't think that this fight will go to a decision, which is kind of where I would be leaning towards. Because the last time I believe I looked at the fight doesn't go to decision, it was closer to even. Let's see where it's at now. Yeah, it's still minus 120. So I think rather than trying to pick a side here, I think that you're going to want to try to pick for someone who's going to get the finish. Minus 115 Muniz, minus 105 Arroyo, and minus 120 for the fight doesn't go to decision. I'm pretty certain that they're going to line this or put the total at over under 2.5 as well. So if you guys really want to wait it out for the 2.5 to come out. But I definitely like the fight doesn't go to decision here. I'm going to take Antonio Arroyo by probably second round finish, actually. I think that Muniz is going to continue to overextend himself to try to get this fight to the ground. Arroyo is going to have a good job of keeping this fight on his feet. He's going to defend a couple takedowns against the cage, dig for underhooks, use his strength, push Muniz off of him, start to implement those leg kicks, and then eventually, wear him down in the second round and then really put it on him and finish him off. I wouldn't even be surprised if at some point in the second round this fight gets to the ground with the Arroyo on top and the Arroyo just landing like just beautiful shots from on top from somewhat of a gassed-ish Muniz who's going to be really trying to get this fight to the ground. We've seen in a lot of fights in the past, just like Darren Wynn is one that really comes to mind, is guys that really try to force fights to the ground. Sometimes they gas themselves out more than the guy who's trying not to get taken down, and there's obviously cases where it's the opposite, but I think that we could see that here with Muniz trying to overexert himself and extend himself a little bit too much to get this fight to the ground, which is why I like the fight doesn't go to decision. Because even if this fight does get to the ground and Muniz somehow pulls off some sort of submission on Arroyo, I think that you're still covered. You're still good. So I like the minus 120 on the fight doesn't go to decision, but I will take Arroyo by second round finish via strikes, and that's my pick. All right, next up we got Charles Oliveira versus Jared Gordon. Leave the rankings to the side. I'm very excited for this fight. I think it's a fun fight. Both guys offer a very fun, aggressive style, which should result in just as fun of a fight as their styles predict. Let's start off with Jared Gordon. He was coming off of 2 straight losses to Diego Ferreira and Joaquim Silva, and then he beat Dan Moret last time around. Let's start off with that Dan Moret fight. Most of the fight was taking place with Jared Gordon kind of grinding on Moret, landing consistent shots. That's the good thing about Jared Gordon. He has tons and tons and tons of cardio, but there's a little bit of a downside to that. Some of his striking in the second and third round starts to become very robotic. He's only moving his arms and it's not much heat really behind it. But he's really trying to close distances, clinch with you, grind on you, maybe even get you to the ground and just pound you out. Not really looking for a submission or any type of choke or anything like that, but more so just trying to pound you and maintain his position, whether it's half guard or have you up against the cage and keeping you down, but continuously punching you in the face with his other hand. But one thing that I found in the Dan Moret fight is he kind of leaves himself open for a little bit of submissions. There were numerous times where Dan Moret, was able to posture for an armbar or a triangle, or even got his back. Thankfully for Jared Gordon, his gas tank allowed him to stay in it, and he got out of those. But I think if you get a guy like Charles Oliveira threatening those submissions, I think they're going to be a little bit more successful with it. The line is quite wide. Minus 355, Charles Oliveira. Plus 295 for Jared Gordon. My opinion, a little bit too wide. Now, just hear me out. I think Charles Oliveira is going to win. However, I think that Jared Gordon, if he continuously stays out of those bad positions and keeps the fight going and keeps pushing the pace on Charles Oliveira, we've seen Charles fade and break in the past. He's on a great win streak right now, which spans many fights. I think it's over. Yeah, it's a 5-fight win streak. His last loss was a ground and pound finish via Paul Felder way back in December of 2017. So he's reaching close to 2 years undefeated. But in that streak, he's finished Clay Guida, Christos Giagos, Jim Miller, David Taymor, and Nick Lentz. Great finishes, great wins. The most impressive, in my opinion, in that stretch is David Taymor. And not just the way he did, not just the fact that he won, but the way he did it. His striking looked a lot better. He's mainly known as a jiu-jitsu guy, but in his past several fights, he's really, really put together his hands. He hurt David Taymor with a beautiful elbow, a beautiful step-in elbow, and then eventually, went for the choke and got the finish there. I think he holds a record for most submission wins in UFC history at 13. He could have got another submission victory against Nick Lentz in his fight after that and made it 14. However, he decided to, after dropping Nick Lentz, he decided to just go with the ground and pound and just get the finish that way. Probably could have hooked up a choke somehow, but he's like, fuck it, let's get a KO win. If I'm not mistaken, that was actually his first KO win since 2010, which just shows you how often he's really fishing for submissions. This guy does not like to go to decisions. Jared Gordon has seen his handful of decisions in his career, but I think this is another fight that has the high likelihood of not going the distance. I think if this fight goes into the third round, it's going to be a little bit tricky for Charles Oliveira. That's where I think that Jared Gordon's cardio is going to come into play. However, he needs to make sure that he's very tight and crisp with his striking and his forward movement when he's actually moving forward. Otherwise, Charles Oliveira is going to take advantage of that. Jared Gordon doesn't throw the most into his punches in those third rounds. However, he's still able to outpace, outgrind, and outwork these guys. I think Charles Oliveira won't be an exception to that rule. So he's going to have to finish this within a round and a half if I believe he's going to have success. I think he's capable of that. I think he's going to, he might be pressured initially. I think Jared Gordon's going to try to take the front foot and really push it on Charles Oliveira here. But I think that with the impressive improvements that we've seen from Charles Oliveira with his striking, I think it's going to get Jared Gordon eventually start to go on his back feet or on his back foot for that remaining, for the remainder of the first round and probably the majority of the second round. But I think in that instance, we'll find Charles Oliveira somehow lock up a submission on Jared Gordon. Jared Gordon can't get too comfortable trying to clinch or outgrind Charles Oliveira with grappling because I think Oliveira will have the better wherewithal to find the positions to turn and get Jared Gordon's back or even throw up any type of submission, because I think just like his striking in the third round, his grappling is kind of the same too, where he's able to get to these positions and outwork and out-hustle these guys, and it's just completely overwhelming these guys. But his technique kind of suffers with that trade-off. He's going to have to really, really mind his P's and Q's if he gets Charles Oliveira on the ground. Minus 355, like I said, in my opinion, is way too wide of a line. I wouldn't feel comfortable betting Charles Oliveira straight, especially at that line. Maybe as a parlay, but I'm not 100% sure. Personally, I'm not sure. I don't even know if I'm going to put in my Hail Mary parlay. I'm going to have to check it out first. But I really, really like Charles Oliveira here to get the victory in the first round via, punches followed up by a submission. But if it gets past the round and a half mark, I think it's going to get very tricky for Charles Oliveira to find the finish, because I think that Jared Gordon will probably have more in the gas tank. I do want to touch on Jared Gordon's fight with Joaquim Silva. That was a fight, like I said, where his cardio may have been a little bit better than Joaquim Silva's, but his lack of technique and the trade-off of cardio for technique in terms of continuing to push the pace, it showed there. Like he left himself defensively wide open for Joaquim Silva to land a beautiful shot. He followed up and then eventually finished him against the cage. not what you want to see. Diego Ferreira, probably the better technical striker at that point, finished him within 2 minutes. I'm not saying Charles Oliveira is the craziest, the best striker out there right now, but with the amount of improvements that we've seen, I think he could have some success in hurting and rocking Jared Gordon and then eventually clamping on a choke. And that's the way and path to victory I believe that we're going to see for Charles Oliveira. And I think if you are going to bet Charles Oliveira, I don't know why this didn't come to me at the beginning of this breakdown, but betting him inside the distance is probably the way to go. Minus 180 is a crazy line considering you're betting somebody to win inside the distance, and the fight doesn't go to decision is minus 270. So take what you want with the fact that Charles Oliveira has not seen a decision since Ultimate Fighter 20 finale against Jeremy Stevens way back in December of 2014. That was over 5 years ago since this guy's gone to a judge's scorecard. Otherwise, he's finished in round 3, round 1, round 1, round 3, round 2, round 1, round 2, round 1, round 2, round 1, round 2, round 2. This guy just doesn't like the judges' scorecards, and can you blame him considering how bad some of them have been? Just to add to that, he did end up winning that decision against Jeremy Stevens. And even before that, let's just see. Yeah, his last decision before that was the beating that he took to Frankie Edgar back in 2013, July. But yeah, I got Charles Oliveira to win by first round submission, but that line is just way too wide for me to justify playing that. Maybe in my Hail Mary parlay. Maybe, not 100% sure. All right, let's move on to the co-main event of the night, which is Mauricio Shogun Rua against Paul Craig. If you guys have been following me for a while now, you guys know that I am probably the biggest Shogun fan out there. When I first got into MMA, he was one of the first guys that I would watch back in Pride. And I've loved watching him fight. He brings a fun, exciting style. One of the better fighters out there. But once his chin started to decline, it's been harder and harder for me to watch him fight. So when I heard that he was supposed to be fighting Sam Alvey in November of 2019, I'm like, ooh. Maybe 2014, 2015 Shogun would have some success here, but I don't know about 2019 Shogun against a one-dimensional fighter like Sam Alvey. Eventually, Sam Alvey pulls out. In comes Paul Craig, which is still a little bit of a tricky fight for Shogun Rua here. The line, first let me get that, minus 270 for Shogun, plus 230 for Paul Craig. Very wide line in my opinion. Shogun hasn't fought since he beat Tyson Pedro in December of last year. And that was a weird fight. Tyson Pedro had a lot of success in that first round where he hurt Shogun on numerous occasions, just couldn't get him out of there. And then in the second round, he got controlled by Shogun Rua, who doesn't normally control his opponents on the ground like that. So that's what makes it a little bit tricky for me to understand why Shogun Rua is such a huge favorite here. Obviously, in the fight before that, we know he got dusted by Anthony Smith, but I don't see him being able to control a guy like Paul Craig on the ground like he controlled Tyson Pedro. Paul Craig's going to be flipping a lot more for, sweeps and reversals and looking for submissions, whereas Tyson Pedro just seemed like he had no idea what the fuck to do on the ground. Yeah, he had a little bit of a possible Kimura going, but he's not going to be able to pull that off on a guy like Shogun. But I think Shogun's only getting slower. He's only, continuing to decline. He's 37 now. Doesn't fight all that often. He's had 2 fights since pretty much the beginning of 2017. So over closing in on 3 years now, where he's only fought twice. This is going to be his 3rd fight. Good striker, a little bit slower now too. We obviously know that Paul Craig isn't fucking a wizard on the feet. He managed to crack Vinicius Mojera last time around and had some good grappling exchanges on the ground before cracking Mojera and then finishing him with a rear naked choke. But we all knew he was going to lose to Alonzo Menifield. That's the type of striker that Paul Craig is for sure going to lose to, is a guy that throws with absolute heat and some technique, not throwing any shade at Kennedy and Zetsuku or anything, but he's gonna falter on the guys who throw with as much veracity as a guy like Alonzo Menifield. But Shogun, he's more of an overwhelming striker at this point. I don't think he really has that one-shot knockout power anymore, and he hasn't really one-shot knocked out anybody in quite some time. The Tyson Pedro one was a combination of overwhelming plus Pedro falling to the ground with an apparent knee injury, I believe. Gian Vellante is fucking the worst fighter on the roster. I'm not sure why he's still on there. But in terms of punches, James Tahuna, probably the last guy that he's finished that you could be like, okay, he legit like knocked him out. And that was December of 2013. We're talking about 6 years ago. I don't know why anybody would feel comfortable playing Shogun Rua above minus 200 in this spot, even above minus 170. Like, again, I am a huge Shogun fan, but this is on the feet, it's obviously all him. But all Paul Craig needs to do is just fucking bite down on his mouthpiece and just swing. You're going to land on Shogun. You're probably going to hurt him in the process. Then it's going to be easier to take him down, and it's going to be even easier to sub him in that situation. Even with Shogun, not rocked or anything like that, I think Paul Craig could have some success trying to get Shogun down. Shogun hasn't had the craziest or the best takedown defense, and I think it's only going to get worse. Paul Craig's going to be the younger guy here, maybe have a slight strength advantage. 31 years old, 6'4" with a 76-inch reach, whereas Shogun Rua is 6'1" with a 76-inch reach. So having the slight size advantage here too, could land some good knees just like he did against Vinicius Moreira. I'm not saying he's going to go out there and have like a Muay Thai clinic against a guy like Mauricio Shogun Rua, but I think that he could crack Shogun, hurt Shogun, and then follow up with a little bit of jiu-jitsu work and find a choke. I think there is a ton of value on Paul Craig here. Anything above the plus 200 range, I think it's worth a little bit of a shot, and I think he's actually going to be my dog of the night play. It really, really hurts me that I'm going to have to bet against my guy Shogun here, but I see no reason not to. Like, I can currently get plus 221 on Pinnacle. He's at plus 236 on Sportbet. I might just take the shot on him there. But yeah, no more than one unit. I think he's definitely worth a shot here. And Shogun just, I feel bad for the guy. He's not going to get back up there. Let's just quickly dissect his wins that he had. He had a 3-fight winning streak before he ran into Anthony Smith, but he beat Antonio Rogério Nogueira, not the greatest fighter. Corey Smith, split decision victory in a fight where he was pretty much being dominated for like 4 minutes and 4.5 minutes of every single round, and then he eventually finds Corey Anderson's chin, rocks him, and then eventually squeaks out on on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards to get that victory. And the Gian Vellante fight, you guys know I don't rate Gian Vellante. The guy is dog shit. He's probably one of the worst fighters on the roster. So 3 fights, 3 wins right there. And then obviously Anthony Smith comes there and just absolutely murks him. Tyson Pedro, not the best fight IQ, and I even bet Shogun in that spot too. I think I got Shogun around the plus 300 range. That was a no-brainer for me, strictly due to Tyson Pedro's lack of fight IQ. So here, it's going to have to be Paul Craig, spamming takedowns, which I think he'll eventually get one. And I think his jiu-jitsu at this point in time is going to be a little bit too good for Shogun Rua, and he'll be able to find the submission. So I like Paul Craig probably by second round finish. I think he's going to have to really work for takedowns in that first round, but I think come second round, it'll be a little bit easier for him to get the fight to the ground, and then we'll see him pull off a submission there. But I love him at that plus 230-ish range. I think I'm going to pull the trigger actually after I finish up this podcast. So my pick's going to be Paul Craig, second round submission, and that comes with a heavy heart from a true Shogun Rua fan. All right, let's move on to the main event. Jan Blachowicz versus Jacare Souza. This is an intriguing fight. I'm surprised that Jan Blachowicz is taking this route of being the middleweight killer, if you want to call it. These guys coming up from middleweight and trying to establish themselves as a top flight light heavyweight. The only person that was really successful in that with him is Thiago Santos, who went on to get a title shot eventually. But even that fight, he made a very simple mistake, which cost him the entire fight. Let's just get into that. In that Thiago Santos fight, it was a pretty close fight. Jan Blachowicz isn't the most volume striker on the feet. He has good jiu-jitsu, which allows him to submit guys like Nikita Krylov and Devin Clark. And I think that his jiu-jitsu will fare him well in this fight against Jacare Souza, but he doesn't need to get overconfident with it. In the Thiago Santos fight, like I was saying, he literally just switched to southpaw, crashed forward, and Thiago Santos caught him with the left hook. It was more so the fact that Thiago Santos recognized the fact that he was going into his secondary stance and his secondary position, and Thiago Santos kind of just winged the shot, and it landed perfectly. Anybody who's ever boxed or done any type of striking martial art should know that your defense takes a huge hit when you go into your secondary stance. So I think Jan was trying to go into the secondary stance to throw off Thiago Santos, especially with him crashing forward with the combination. But Thiago Santos is a weathered striker, and he's probably seen this situation on numerous occasions. And all he had to do was just throw a power left hook, landed perfectly on Jan Blachowicz's chin, and he gets the victory via stoppage there in the third round. Very, very close fight leading up to that. And that's the thing about Jan Blachowicz. It's tough for him to, it's tough to be confident in a guy like that who doesn't seem to be the most volume striker or most pushing of his type of style. And even in the Luke Rockhold fight, apologies, I got some gassiness or something coming up. But even in the Luke Rockhold fight, he was getting pushed up against the cage for pretty much the entirety of that first round. And then eventually when he was able to get himself out, he was able to take advantage of Luke Rockhold's cocky-ish style on the feet. And land some good shots, hurt Luke Rockhold, especially at the bell there too. So Luke Rockhold was kind of coming in compromised into that second round. And then in the second round, we see Jan Blachowicz land a beautiful left hook on one of the exits of their clinches. It drops Luke Rockhold and then ends up with some ground and pound. A beautiful combination to get the finish against Luke Rockhold there, but it just did not seem like Luke Rockhold was all there, and it was pretty evident in that fight. So big win for Jan Blachowicz there. I think he has a little bit of a tougher test this time around against Jacare Souza. Coming in against Luke Rockhold, he was a pretty decent underdog. I think he was plus 195 going into that Luke Rockhold fight, and now he's like a minus 200 favorite, minus 190 favorite against Jacare Souza. Different type of style that he's going to be challenged with here. I like his strikes, but again, his lack of volume really concerns me. I think his jiu-jitsu is good enough to hold up against a guy like Jacare Souza, and I think that just his tightness and crispness of his strikes give him a bit of an advantage on the feet against Jacare. Speaking of Jacare, coming off that loss from Jack Hermansson, had a lot of steam going into that fight. Was coming off a big win over Chris Weidman in the fight before that. Arguably could have gotten that split decision over Kelvin Gastelum the fight before the Weidman fight. And then in the Jack Hermansson fight, he was originally scheduled to fight Yoel Romero. Romero pulls out, in comes Jack Hermansson, and probably worst case scenario from Jacare, lose-lose situation. You come in against a guy that's relatively unknown, you get a loss, and then Jack Hermansson's kind of skyrocketed a little bit, even though he kind of got screwed over by Jared Cannonier, finishing him in his home, or one of his home countries, I guess you would call it, Denmark, Scandinavian country, that region. That's where Jack Hermansson's from, right? But I don't think that we're going to see Jan Blachowicz coming here with a Jack Hermansson type style. I don't think he's going to be able to, stick a jab in front of Jacare's face for 5 rounds and out grapple him and out power him. I think Jack Hermansson is just a better wrestler, and I don't know if Jan Blachowicz will have that type of success. I still don't completely understand Jacare's striking in terms of this guy throws everything into his fucking strikes. And, the one thing I'll give him, his left hook to the body is probably one of the craziest things I've seen out there, and especially with the veracity he throws into it. He landed a lot heavily on Kelvin Gastelum. The work that he did to Chris Weidman's body as well, ridiculous. I think that all accumulated to him eventually getting that finish of Chris Weidman. And then even with Jack Hermansson, he landed some decent ones. Jack Hermansson did a little bit better of a job than his past opponents in terms of keeping the distance and trying to nullify that body strike as much as possible. That's something that Blachowicz is going to have to be wary of here. Jacare is kind of predictable with his strikes as well. He needs to be hide them a little bit better. Maybe really get some takedowns going behind it. I wouldn't be surprised to see him be successful with takedowns here against Jan Blachowicz. A lot of people are putting stock into the fact that, Jacare is going to be at a major size disadvantage here. I'm not 100% sure about that. 6'1", 72-inch reach for Jacare, 6'2", 78-inch reach for Jan Blachowicz. But going 5 rounds, it always seems like Jacare Souza is having issues with cardio because he always looks like he's huffing and puffing, but he still throws heat whenever he throws his strikes, whether it's kicks, body punches, or even head strikes. He has a lot of power in his hands, regardless, whether first round or fifth round. But he does his best work once he gets this fight to the ground. I think he's going to know that's the way he really needs to approach this fight, is a grapple heavy fight. If he's able to get Jan down, he should be able to control it. He should be able to get some good positions, land some great shots. But we don't know. This 36-year-old Jacare Souza, who's had a little bit of a rough stretch. It's going to be. Oh wait, sorry, that was actually Jan. Jacare's 39. Let me fix that. He's had a little bit of a rough stretch. He's 39. He's been training at X Gym for his last couple of fights, and it seems decent. You know, his hands are coming together a little bit better, even though he throws fucking everything into them. But the body shot has definitely opened up some paths for him, and I think that should be a major key for him in this fight against Jan, who himself doesn't throw as much volume, which is where I think Jacare could slowly steal this fight. But I just don't know what to expect from a guy coming up a weight class, 39 years old, probably against a stronger guy in Jan Blachowicz, but I'm kind of torn on this fight. The value is obvious on Jacare here, you know, being the plus 165, plus 170 dog, but the line is slowly starting to close. So maybe if Jan Blachowicz reaches the minus 150, minus 140-ish range, he'd probably be a little bit better of a bet. But at this point in time, I think Jacare probably holds the value up to about plus 160. So if you can see that line for Jacare, I wouldn't be mad if you guys take the shot. Personally, I don't feel confident enough in him to take the shot, nor do I feel confident enough in Jan Blachowicz to win this fight either. And I really don't know which way to go here. I'm completely torn. You know, I think Jan's getting a lot of rub from his fight against Luke Rockhold, which I believe, just as Warlley Alves should have an asterisk beside his fight against Sergio Moraes, Jan Blachowicz should possibly have an asterisk beside his fight against Luke Rockhold. And that's coming from a guy that, you know, went balls deep on Luke Rockhold in that fight, but he just didn't seem like he wanted to be in there once that bell rang. And I think Blachowicz really took advantage of that, and then eventually found his chin and got the finish there. So Jacare is going to have to come in super motivated. His path to victory here would be to try to push the takedown, try to get this fight to the ground, maybe even throw a little bit more volume than Jan, which again I think is something that we've seen Jan lack in the past. So super close fight. Don't see a reason to really bet Jan here, nor do I feel a reason to bet Jacare either. Fuck. I'm going to go with Jacare here. I think he pulls off the submission maybe in the second or third round, probably third round, after maybe, you know, really pushing the pace as he seems to do in most of his fights in the third round. He gets that second win once that third round comes around, and he really puts it on people. And I think he could do the same thing to Blachowicz here. As long as Blachowicz doesn't pull some sort of like southpaw change, crash forward, and get clipped by some sort of hook, I think Blachowicz should be okay. But if you guys are forcing me to make a pick here, I'm going to take I'm going to take Jacare by third round submission, but it's just not something I'm completely, you know, confident in. So yeah, that's UFC Sao Paulo. Holy shit. You know, decent fights. I feel like I got a good read on a couple of these fights. The only real bet that I'm kind of giving out to you guys on my MMA Lock-Cast is Paul Craig. Even straight's a great bet. And he's roughly around the plus 230 range. I think he holds value at that underdog price. Yeah, that's UFC Sao Paulo. If you guys want to get my MMA Lock-Cast Plus episodes, which I'll probably be dropping on at least 2 or 3 prelim fights over the next couple of days, that's going to be on the Patreon page, www.patreon.com/MMALOTN. And then I also dropped Locked In, which is going to be going over Douglas DeAndrade versus Renan Barão. So if you guys haven't checked that out yet, that's on my YouTube page right now as well. So go check that shit out. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Check me out at MMALOTN on Twitter. Website is www.mmalotn.ca. And then patreon.com/MMALOTN. I won't see you guys until UFC DC. at least for the MMA Lock-Cast. Again, Combative Stories will be out as normal. Deciding Splits will be out as normal. But the MMA Lock-Cast is going on roughly a 2-week vacation just for, at least for this UFC lull that we get after this Sao Paulo card. So thanks for the support as always. Thanks for the guys sticking around during this rough stretch that I've been on. We are going to fucking bounce back. We're going to kill this shit. And we are going to catch these slips. I promise you guys that. Yeah. Thanks as always. Subscribe as well. Hit the like button below. Talk shit in the comments if you guys want. I'm always engaging with y'all. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.